Hey guys, check this out.
Hello and welcome to Check This Out, a podcast where we take an analytical view of the media that appeals to us as individuals and why. I am El, your host, and with me today is special guest and enemy of the show, Lithuasil. If you would, please introduce yourself and give us a little bit more about what your deal is.
Hello everyone. I'm Lithuasil. My pronouns are she, her. I'm terminally online, and in the offline world I am a novelist and a media scholar, and occasionally indie game writer.
Cool. So you're bringing something to us that you're passionate about, that you could probably talk for a great deal of length, I imagine, about. Could you tell us a little bit more about it in your own words?
Well, I've actually written several academic papers about it. I'm here to talk about the 2018 film Assassination, and I know that title is a mouthful, but otherwise it's been a borderline revelatory film when I first stumbled across it by complete accident while going through the depth of Amazon Prime backlog catalog.
The dreaded backlog.
I mean, sometimes there's something interesting uh, in the recommendations. I've honestly found most of my favorite films that way, just by going down a checklist of everything that was recommended or clicking on random things that sounded interesting.
Fair enough. So I've got some questions here designed to help probe into the sort of enjoyment and your appeal, if that's all right by you.
Absolutely.
All right. So, first question. Imagine if I was someone who has just been awoken from a coma or resurrected from being frozen in ice, or like, I don't know, a cucumber magically gifted sentience by some malevolent being. So, I know what media is, but I've never experienced any. How would you explain Assassination Nation without using it or comparing it to anything else?
That's a difficult question for the kind of film it is, but I would say uh, it's what I would like all popcorn cinema to aspire to be. Uh, and it's what I would like the future of popcorn cinema and guilty pleasure kind of cinema to be. It's difficult to describe it without comparing it to its sort of contemporaries, but it's on its baseline, it is a sort of action thriller, but calling it that doesn't really do it justice.
Perhaps a little bit of like the starter of the plot, maybe.
Um, it's about four high school girls in the small town of Salem uh, who become embroiled or become the suspects of uh, ongoing hacking spree of the sort of dark secrets or just petty little secrets of the adults of the town being exposed on the internet and being, as they end up, the prime suspects, and everyone is all too willing to believe them guilty, they eventually find themselves hunted by a veritable lynch mob.
Ooh, sounds interesting. So, question 2. Hypothetically, our positions are reversed, and I'm guesting on your immensely popular and award winning podcast, and I've just answered the first question with that response verbatim. What is the part that stood out most to you?
The semi-adept attempts at sidestepping what the story actually is about would be my guess.
Hinting that there's probably more to it that would become self evident without needing to explain or give away the whole premise.
Yeah. And there is a lot of it that isn't really done justice by talking about the story so much as it is talking about a feeling, talking about a style, because it is, for all its other aspirations, still an immensely stylish film. And but there is a lot more of a feel to it. There is a lot more of a play with the kind of themes it evokes, the kind of scenarios it evokes, the kind of protagonists it evokes. And it is, in that regard, very much a film for film buffs and a film for people who want their movies to aspire to be a little bit more.
So you mentioned the themes, which is interesting. What would you say is the biggest theme that runs through it?
Teenage feminine catharsis.
I mean, it's something you don't see a lot of in the multimedia, multi-million dollar landscape. Is something designed for not the the archetypical male, I guess.
It's not just not a film designed necessarily for or by the archetypical male, because the actresses playing the four main characters uh, had an immense amount of input into bringing their characters to life, into shaping how their characters are presented. But it's almost downright accusatory at times. It's astutely aware of the restraints and of the unjustified and unfair demands that the kind of people it depicts are subject to, and it wants you watching it to be as angry about them as it is itself.
Trying to provoke that response in action, I guess.
Yeah. At the same time, when I say it is a very modern film, it's, for example, one of the first films that I have seen that has, and rightfully so, because the subject matter does get pretty heavy, but it does have a trigger warning reel as part of the film, even if you don't see it on a website that has tags or anything. It is part of the film to show you flashes of maybe you might want to not watch this. It's done a little bit tongue in cheek, like there is a trigger warning for torture over a snippet of the school principal going, "This is high school," but beyond that, it is a legitimate trigger warning reel in a film that sort of needs one, not just because it does get fairly gory, but because it gets fairly heavy in other ways. But it has it. It wants you to know in advance, and it's also very good about the way that it handles those subject matters, at least in my opinion, to the point where, for example, one of the four protagonists, Bex, played by the wonderful Hari Neff, is a trans woman, and she is subject to a degree of transphobia throughout the film, but in a way that never once, even when she is actively being antagonized, even when people intend to hurt her, her femininity, her gender is never drawn into question. Just like the film is clearly aware of the themes of race or of gender power dynamics that come into play, but without ever crossing a line where it uses the same parlance as the perpetrators.
I was just going to say, without ever like crossing a line on that sort of topics, but yeah. So the question three. So obviously, this is something that you care about and are passionate about. What got you to give it a chance in the first place?
Well, like I said, it was recommended to me after I had turned off the Amazon Prime The Purge TV show, because it's a little bit on its surface, it's a little bit stylistically similar. Like if you just saw the trailer, if you just saw the masks that feature heavily in the trailer, you'd be getting
Like,
sort of Purge-y vibes from
yeah,
it.
like the screenshots of here's what we would suggest
Yeah,
next type of thing. Yeah,
and then I've made it my personal sort of professional habitus to give everything that I come across and haven't heard of yet at least a couple minutes of chance. And
yeah,
at that point, I was already hooked.
oh, fair enough. I mean, sometimes all it takes is just the algorithm working for a change. Uh, so, question four. For some people, a sense of like mindedness and community is integral to their enjoyment of something. So, to your knowledge, is there a community around Assassination Nation? And if so, what are they like?
Not to my knowledge. It's usually when I recommend this film to people, people haven't heard it before, even in like my film department. Um, so I can't really speak to that. It's not even if you go by Metacritic and IMDb and whatnot, it's not even a terribly popular film. I think it's got like a 5.8 or 5.9 average on IMDb. At the same time, it is a film about young women being angry and fighting to take agency into their own hands, to take agency back, and it does stand to some amount of unfortunate reason that that's not terribly popular with the average person that writes Metacritic reviews.
Yeah, it's a shame, but at least now it's kind of getting a bit of a spotlight. Hopefully, this is quite popular and takes off.
Um, we can all hope so.
So, question five. There are a lot of aspects of media that land differently with different people, because obviously people are all different. What was your favourite part?
That's a little difficult to talk about without spoilers.
So, for anyone listening, consider this a spoiler warning.
There's a part at the end when the main character, or the most heavily focalized of the four girls, almost speaks to the camera, speaks at the camera directly, and almost verbatim calls for action, calls to take their fight outside of the screen. And that is a tremendously good thing, in my opinion, and it is a tremendously powerful thing in the way that it is framed, in the way that it is shot, in the way that, without making her larger than life, without making her more than she is imbued with power in all the best ways that film can make the subaltern powerful.
So more like the dynamic of the art rather than chasing the money.
It's certainly, I mean, the film also didn't make money. Let's be real
Well,
here.
yeah. I mean, in
I
like the whole Hollywood sense of it, like not just going after the big bucks.
No, it's not. It's definitely not a safe film, and I enjoy that about it as well. But it is radical beyond its radical beyond what I certainly expected going in, to the point where uh, I outright wrote a paper about this in a seminar about revolutionary or agitating cinema.
Fair enough. So, following on then from the previous question, what do you think would appeal most to the average person, the lay cinema goer?
I think there is, unlike some of the more difficult to watch art house cinema, it sticks with a consistently very stylish and very well planned, very well executed, slick cinematic language, the likes of which we're used to uh, from contemporary high budget sort of action films or thrillers. And I'm not going to say that makes it easy watching, because owing to the subject matter, especially if you are at all affected by these things, it's not. And if you aren't affected by any of these things, then it's not really easy watching either, but at least on a level of cinematic language, it is a very well executed film, a very slick, very elegant film. There is, at some point, what I am going to call one of the greatest home invasion sequences that I have ever seen on film, where you see, just in a single unbroken take, the camera almost circling around a house, looking in through different windows, showing as this building is slowly taken over by the assailants, as people are slowly being grabbed. Uh, it's a very nice film to watch in a way, even if you're not as intrigued by the subject matter off the bat, even if you are just looking for a very well crafted, slightly gory kind of action thriller. It does provide that.
So, just off the surface level, it's still an entertaining film.
Yes.
Fair enough. Cool. So, question 7. If I do enjoy this because of your excellent recommendation, what would be your number one follow up? It doesn't need to be a sequel or anything, just if I wanted something more along the same lines.
Given the nature of the film, that's not terribly easy. Um, if you enjoy that sort of style, I would probably recommend 2010's Bunraku, uh, starring Josh Hartnett and Demi Moore, as a sort of stylistically similar film. if you enjoy this sort of topic and this sort of stylized presentation of these kinds of topics, I would recommend Nicholas Winding Refn's excellent series, Too Old to Die Young, with the slight caveat that while I think that it is a great experience, it is certainly less easy watching. It's more in a sort of art house direction. It's more in a sort of very ponderous style. It's more difficult watching, but it is the closest that I have seen someone work into a similar direction, at least in my interpretation of that series, which, given the director's oeuvre, might be entirely wrong.
Hmm. So, question 8. Sometimes our enjoyment comes from a position of relativity or connection with what we're seeing or experiencing. Did you have a favourite character? And what about them stood out to you?
While I enjoy all four of the protagonists a great deal, there is a certain personal connection to Hari Neff's Bex, who experiences things in this film that I have, to some extent or the other, experienced or felt. And
Mm.
to some extent, I wish I could handle them with the same strength and grace that she ends up doing.
Fair enough. I do apologise if that brought up anything uncomfortable for you.
No worries. It's something that I have gotten used to, though it was genuinely worth it, but difficult the first 2 or 3 times I watched the film. And once
Mm.
again, very much a trigger warning for people who experience transphobia. It handles it well, but it does depict it, and be in the right mindset when you try to watch this.
Yeah, that's a fair call. So, question 9, which will end up being the last one here. There are a lot of these types of interviews that lean on the question of what would you bring with you if you were stranded on a desert island? But that's not this show. What we ask instead is to imagine that you're not only stuck on a desert island with no hope of rescue, but the choice of what to bring along with you has been made already, and for you it is Assassination Nation. How often will you revisit this, and how long until you get sick of it?
I don't think it's a movie that you really get sick of. It's not a movie you want to watch every day, certainly, but it is a movie that you do not get sick of, or at least that I do not get sick of. It's a movie that always, certainly after I've combed through it very closely for, as I mentioned, several papers, carries a degree of uplifting strength, of genuine catharsis with it. And I don't think it's going to lose that, even if I would probably get bored of it after the 50th time or so.
I mean, eventually it comes for us all. So, thank you for entertaining my rather silly questions, but hopefully that's given people a bit of a deeper insight into this passion of yours.
Thanks for having me.
So, before I completely bring down the show rating with just me being me, it's time for the best part of the show and everyone else's favourite, a word from the sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. Really, you are the best of us. Now, I'm just going to follow up from last episode with my follow-up review of the last episode's enemy of the show and self-proclaimed professional die-rolling failure, Jeremy, who brought to us a recommendation of Strange Days. So, from the very get-go, you're basically jamming on the gas and you do not let up until the film is over. There are some down points, of course, but that's only because you're taking a turn at 60 miles an hour over the speed limit rather than 80. It is very frantic energy to it, but I still managed to find the connections that he mentioned that that I would say that people other than me would also connect with. In that there's the big twists, just the interesting scene and set dressings. And I can definitely see where a lot of his characterization for D&D has come from now and how formative of an experience that is. So I guess I would call it 4.5 stars out of 5. Definitely worth trying to find it, chase it up, look it up, give it a watch. And if you want to know a bit more about it, see the previous episode. And before we wrap up the final episode of Check This Out for this recording session, and the second time that I've made that joke, would you be able to tell us a little bit more about where to find you online, or if you have anything to sort of advertise?
You can find my very occasional lukewarm takes on Twitter at poor_humanities. And otherwise, for an English-speaking audience, I don't really have much published right now that's worth checking out, I'm afraid. Most of my publications are in German so far.
So there you go, audience. Learn German, and then you can find some excellent literature. So on that note, I've been Elle.
And I've been Lithuasiel.
And this has been Check This Out, a podcast of media positivity. And remember, you can always burn that bridge when you come to it.